Why did you start 1,000 Podcasters? That's the question I'm answering today, and it's a question that you might want to consider for your own podcast as well. What's happening, podcasters? This is 1,000 Podcasters, and I'm Brian Ensminger. I'm a podcaster and a podcast editor, and I want to see you be successful with your podcast. As I'm recording this, I'm a little bit tired. I was up late editing another show last night, and so I'm a little bit tired, but I wanted to make sure that I got this out because right now, I'm in the middle of a challenge. This is part of a daily podcast episode series inspired by David Hooper over at Big Podcast, and it's also part of National Podcast Post Month. The interesting thing about goals, though, is just because I made it my goal to accept this challenge and to deliver a daily show, I also want to make sure that it's valuable. So today I want to talk to you about why I started my podcast or started this particular podcast. Whether you already have a podcast or maybe you're thinking of starting one, you probably already know that it's really important to know why you're doing something. And in particular, if you think about launching a podcast, it's really important to understand why you're doing it, to be clear on that, because as Stephen Covey would remind us, we want to make sure that we start with the end in mind because that will inform everything we do from that point forward. Now, you might be thinking about things like money or fame or popularity or perhaps giving a voice to those who need to have one or speaking to an issue or something else. There are a lot of reasons you could start with why you would want to have a podcast, but even if you have a solid why, you might also need a catalyst to get you started. It was a catalyst that got me started in this daily podcast challenge. It was David Hooper who threw down the gauntlet and got me started on this daily challenge. But whatever the reason, whatever the catalyst, there's something that's going to be important for you to always keep front and center. And that's why I want to share the story behind this podcast, 1,000 Podcasters. Now, as I got this show started, I already had a show that had been running for about 4.5 or 5 years. I don't remember the exact length of time that it had been running, but it was over 250 episodes in. So it was a show that I'd been running for a while. And across that time, across those 5+ years, I'd had the idea for several daily or daily-ish types of shows for quite some time. I thought about perhaps doing something with a local focus or something to market my podcast editing or some other kind of similar thing, something to do a daily show. And I had ideas for revenue generation, ideas for how to get new ideas or new content for new episodes, how to make it all work, and more. But I hadn't launched. As I thought about how to work everything out, I knew that I was short on time and short on workload. And so I'd never launched a second show. I wanted to make sure that I was delivering a quality show for my primary show, and I'd never launched the additional show. But then came the catalyst. I have a friend named Jim Baker. He's a podcaster, and currently he's in Hawaii. And he asked me to join him in a challenge. And it wasn't a podcasting challenge. It was actually a challenge with Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels, and it was called the One Funnel Away Challenge. And the idea with this particular challenge was to create a sales funnel, create a product, and then market that in order to build a business. And as I was getting ready to join this challenge, I was also preparing to speak at an online conference. It was an online summit, the Christian Podcasters Summit. And so I thought, well, I need to help promote this summit that I'm going to be part of. And there's this challenge that I can be part of. So why not go ahead and put these two things together and do the very best that I can to help market this summit? And after being a part of the challenge, the One Funnel Away challenge for, I don't know, a week or two, it would have been back in April or May of 2019, we talked about developing a story and developing ideas, how to structure a story so that people can connect with you and some things like that. And there was an assignment that came with us to help develop our voice. And that assignment was to choose one of three things, either live video, a daily blog, or a daily podcast, and then to pick those up and do those every day. And I thought, well, I don't really want to do live video. I don't really want to blog daily, but I know a little bit about podcasting. So let's go ahead and do this. So I chose podcast, and I launched 1,000 Podcasters as an assignment, as an opportunity to develop my voice, and it was part of this One Funnel Away challenge. However, knowing that it was to develop my voice and something like that wasn't good enough for me because I wanted to make sure that I never lost sight of something even more important than that. I'll get back to that in just a minute. So I had the idea, but there was this catalyst, an assignment, a challenge. And so I had toptieraudio.com. That was the editing business. That still is the editing business. And I thought that might be the perfect place to develop a complimentary podcast to help market what I do and to develop my voice and to market this summit that I was part of. So I brainstormed some ideas and I settled on the idea of 1,000 podcasters to name my show because I thought, well, it's a very clear goal to say I would like to help 1,000 podcasters. So I had the title. I went ahead and got the domain name. I secured the social accounts. I got to canva.com. I developed my own artwork, and you can tell by look at it that it was not developed by a graphic designer. It was developed by me. I set up my podcast hosting on Libsyn. I set up the plugin integration and all of the necessary things to help this work well with my WordPress website. And on the very next day number 2 of that, I hit record to record my first episode. I was supposed to share my story and have some calls to action. So that's exactly what I did. But going back, that wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough for me to just share my story. I wanted to give people a real reason to come back other than just hearing my story. I wanted to give my audience something of value, something related to podcasting, whether I was speaking to mindset or tips or suggestions or tools, things like that. I wanted to make sure that I was delivering something of incredible value. And that's the thing I'd like to have us keep in mind. It's something that in my mind is at least as important as the why behind why you do what we do, and probably even more important than the catalyst is to make sure that while our goals and strategies can serve us, that's okay. We always want to make sure that we're keeping our listeners in mind. If you have a podcast, I'm wondering, what was the catalyst? Was there a catalyst for you to launch? Was there a challenge or some kind of deadline that was set that encouraged you to step up and take action at that time? And if so, I'd love to hear about that. If you haven't launched yet, I'm wondering, what will it take to push you over the edge to get you started? I'd love it if you'd let me know the answer to that question. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Top Tier Audio. And if you would like to connect with me or subscribe to the show, you can do all of that kind of stuff at toptieraudio.com. Subscribe to the show, set up a consultation, talk to me about perhaps editing your show, all of that stuff, toptieraudio.com. Thanks again. Now go out there and make a great podcast.